The life of a controller main is never easy. I mean, it's rewarding, sure, but it's often, well, let's just say underappreciated, man. However, the more you play the game and you rank up, the more you really realize just how pivotal of a role being a controller is. So to help you control space better and with ease, here is a guide on where to smoke on every map in the current competitive rotation. Ascent is a classic map that offers a variety of attacking options. So starting with A site, it is pretty straightforward smoke placement on the choke points at Heaven and Tree. As a general rule, if you're playing controller, always place your smokes right at the edge of the choke points. This is so that enemies peeking out are going to be forced to be exposed to multiple angles. If your smokes bulge out a bit from the choke points, they can use this coverage to isolate angles. So moving back to Ascent, the smoke on Tree serves as a temporary cover until you're able to close the switch. Now as for Heaven, make it as tight as possible so that enemies are going to hesitate to push out further. Now there are also some nasty one-ways you can work with for post plant. So for this example, I'm going to switch to Omen because he's easier to control for one-ways. So here's one for Generator, and another for this open plant spot. You can achieve the same results with Brimstone, but since his smokes don't really refresh, it might be tough to pull off. For defending on A, you can start early with this classic one-way on A main. However, you can stick with the default A main choke point smoke if you want to play a little bit more passively. You can also use these alternative smokes for A main if your team wants early control and the ult orb. So moving on to B site, drop your smokes on Market and CT so you can focus on the angles on site as you and your team scale up. Similar to A, you're going to use the smoke on Market as a temporary cover till you close the switch. Once you have the site and are playing post plant inside, you can use these smokes on speed lane and stairs to make it harder for the enemy team to retake. For defending, you can smoke off the choke point like this, or drop deeper smokes for early control. If you're planning to take mid, there are two spots you can smoke off depending on where you're planning to end up. If you're pushing Tree, you need to cover Market. If you're pushing Market, you need to cover Tree. Smoking Tree depends on how you want to control it though. A deeper smoke can force them back farther, but they can still peek out from that area. But if you smoke a little bit closer to Catwalk, you're going to deny a lot more vision, but they can creep up. So if no one's watching that spot, then it can be absolutely detrimental. If you're watching mid on defense, the best spots to smoke to gain a bit more control are mid top and tiles. If you're brand new to the game, this is something that could really skyrocket your progress. But if you really want to jumpstart your success, I want to introduce you to the two brand new courses we just published over on the SkillCapped site. These courses are designed to walk you through everything you need to know about climbing stupidly fast in Valorant. First, we have our Jumpstart course that we made to teach you the basics and expertly fast-track you through the beginner process. But once you're more experienced, we even went the extra mile and created this Level Up course to teach you the advanced tactics that players use to climb up into the higher ranks of Ascendant and beyond. Whether you're a brand new player or you're still trying to hit those peak ranks, these two courses will have everything you need to break past those plateaus and start climbing. There's a reason SkillCapped has become the only premium instructional resource in the scene. We invest and believe in our content. So much so that we even back it up with two guarantees. First, we give you 2 full weeks to explore all the things we offer, and if it's not for you, you get a full refund, no questions asked. Our second guarantee is that you'll climb at least 5 whole divisions, or again, you get every penny back, no questions asked. You've got everything to gain, literally nothing to lose, so get started by using that discount link in the description below. Anyway, back to the video. So next up, we have Icebox, and we're going to take a different approach here based on who the best controller pick is on this map, which is undoubtedly going to be Viper. So if you're not using Viper on this map, it's definitely high time that you should, as regular smokes just don't work as effectively on Icebox. For attacking on A, you're going to start your wall all the way back from the entrance. Pull out your minimap and use it as a reference so you can align your wall like this. The important thing is to cover the entirety of screens so you'll have more space to control. If you're playing from A main, you can use Viper Orb on this green box to gain some coverage for backside. You can also use this A Heaven smoke to make it harder for enemies to retake from ramps and backside. For an effective A defense, stand on this line outside screens and align the circle towards this part of the wall. This is going to give you and your team complete coverage on site despite the different elevated angles. There's also a good one-way Viper Orb lineup you can use on pipes. Just stand on this corner and aim your crosshair towards this spot. throw your Viper Orb, and it should land perfectly on pipes, giving you a nice one-way from the left side or maze. For attacking on B, you're going to start from this line on the wall by Garage and align your crosshair like so. This is going to cover a pretty decent area on Orange, top site, as well as Snowman. Now on defense, it's actually not going to be a great idea to invest your wall due to this site's unique landscape, but it should be enough to use this Viper Orb one way so you can control B main from multiple angles. Now for attacking or lurking on mid, there are two Viper Orb lineups you can work with. The first one is for covering the entirety of mid and Rat Hole, which allows you to lurk into kitchen or orange. Stand on this spot by the box and aim your crosshair toward this corner. For a mid-boiler lineup that's good for covering that usual KJ turret spot, hop on this box and go all the way into the corner. Next, align your crosshair towards this line and make your way to the leftmost area. Pull out your orb, throw it, and it should land perfectly on mid-boiler. Now, if you've noticed, we have no smoke for defending mid. Well, that's mainly because in Icebox, smoking mid is often counterproductive against defenders. As much as possible, you need to have a trap or someone watching mid in order to control it. You can also see Sage players often wall it to prevent access to mid and kitchen. Next, we have Fracture, and while there are many choke points you can smoke off in this map, there's actually only a few that you really need to worry about. The rest of them, well, let's just say it's a must for your team to clear and control them manually. For attacking on A, you can just straight up smoke the 3 pivotal choke points if you use Brim, which coincidentally is the best controller for this map. The 3 spots you need to smoke off is Drop, CT, and Ropes. However, if your team is planning to control and take Sands, you can skip the Rope smoke for that. Or if your team is also pinching from Dish, you can skip the smoke on Drop. For defending, just smoke off Drop, A main, and Door like this. Now, smoking off Door can be optional, but it's just good at preventing attackers from easily taking that area. If you want early control while your team aggresses from A main and Door, you can smoke this spot. For an effective B execute, it may seem like there are many angles to worry about, but the choke points you only really need to focus on smoking are B Link and B Canteen. It's not really ideal to use up another smoke for Tower or Arcade, so try to just clear those areas and control the angles. Since Fracture thrives on pinch plays, you wouldn't need to worry about Tower and Arcade if your team has good map control from the north and south sides. On defending, these are the choke points you'd want to cover if you're playing passively on site and Tower or Arcade. And since it's common to aggress and take early control, this one's a good spot to control B main early on if your team wants to fight for the neutral zone. Alright, moving on to Haven. Apart from the usual smoke spots, there are actually a few good one-ways you can utilize to give your enemies unwinnable post plants. Omen's going to be your best bet thanks to his smokes being able to refresh and how well he can navigate the map. So starting on A, you'd want to smoke off Heaven and CT to allow your team to focus on clearing the site. Now, some people would argue that the deep smoke on CT isn't as good as placing it closer to the cross on Graffiti and Hell, but the deeper smoke denies more space, so I'm going to take that any day of the week over the other ones. And once you're able to take site, here's an effective one-way smoke you can use to make their retake much harder. If you plant on default, simply place your smoke on top of this generator. This works effectively on both A main and sewers, allowing your team to hold from both areas and wait for the tap. Next up, on B site, it's also pretty straightforward, as you just need to cover the entrances from A and C link. Now, there's not a whole lot of space to work with on B, so most of the time your team is going to have to work on site or from mid courtyard. For defending B, it's as simple as throwing a smoke to block off the choke point at B main. For pushing Garage, it's also pretty common to smoke off Garage window, and for good reason, because enemies are going to have to jump out to peek out the window. This will also allow your team to push safely into C through Garage. For attacking C, you can smoke off CT and Garage like this. But if your team is doing a pinch from C and Garage, you can definitely skip smoking off Garage. For playing post plant, you can either do this one way on the default open plant spot or in this spot at backside. Do take note that these one-way spots work best when you're playing from C long and if the enemy team has no walls or no smokes left. With the removal of the ping system, playing from C long to spam can be easily countered, so do try to be wary of this strat according to who are the remaining agents left on the enemy team. For defending C, all you really have to worry about is this choke point on C long. However, if you don't have control of garage, you can also smoke off the choke point on that area. So on Lotus, there are a few spots that people might think need to be smoked, but honestly, they just require some clearing and some control. In reality, there are actually just a few spots to worry about here. For starters, your team is going to need to smoke off A stairs to scale into sight. Once your team is scaled up to the orb, you can go ahead and smoke off heaven. Once you're on site after planning, say you and a teammate are just holding from tree, you can do this one way on drop for easy picks on anyone retaking from that area. However, this is going to force you to hold solely from tree and the narrow passage in between. Nevertheless, it's definitely useful tech to use to make defending against drop way easier. For defending A, we're going to start off with the basic passive smoke. If you're not fighting for rubble control, it's enough to place your smokes on this choke point. It also provides a nice cross from sight, stairs, and the small pocket from the pillar on the right. If you're fighting for rubble control, you can smoke the entrance to rubble right here. If your team is taking B, it's best to smoke off the choke point on C link and upper. There's no need to smoke off A link near the baby door, and your team should just straight up control it. Even better if your team has a good pinch from A rubble to A link. When playing post-plant, you can use this one way if the spike is planted on the pit to make defusing much more difficult for the enemy. Smoking off B for defense is simple and straightforward. All you have to do is place your smokes on this choke point, and it should be enough to slow the enemy's side execute down. Lastly, we have the C site, and on attacking, the choke points you need to smoke off are Waterfall and CT. Place your smokes on these spots and make sure the edge of the smokes aren't protruding. These smokes will give your team the much needed flexibility to control the entire site. For defending C passively, smoke off the entrance on this choke point, and for an effective early C mound control, you can place your smoke on this pillar for a nice one-way that's difficult to get past. On Pearl, despite having a massively open landscape, Astra is the top controller pick here. But if you have secondary controllers like Viper, then it'd be easier to gain coverage and control more space. Nonetheless, a solo Astra would be enough to cover what you need to cover. On attacking A site, smoke off Art and Flower and have the team clear out the area near dugout. If you have a pinch coming from mid to Art, you can skip the Art smoke and just use the second one on dugout. Due to Astra's unique tech of recalling her smokes though, you can use this to cross this area on Art safely. For defense, it's a pretty straightforward smoke on the A main choke point. If your team is doing a pinch, or if you're lurking on B link, you could do the recall smoke tech here on mid connector to cross safely or condition the enemy. For taking B, you can start by recalling a smoke on this spot to allow you and your team to cross to ramp safely. Once you've scaled up near the site, you can start smoking off tower and CT by placing your stars in these areas. Do take note that these are the priority spots you need to smoke off, so if you're worried about B-Link, just have a teammate or utility hold that area. And in the words of Tins on smoking off B-side properly,
okay, if we're doing B hits, just smoke, tower, and spawn. We don't need street smokes. I don't know. This might be too much common sense. I swear everyone throws a street smoke. What is with people throwing street smokes? I love it when streets open. Like, people are just gonna run through street anyways. So how is that like a threat of an angle? If you smoke tower and spawn, you can just kill anyone peeking street and pillar. But instead, you have to fight spawn, and then there's a weird crossfire if people run out through the street.
Now, if you need a quick one-way for post-plant, you can use this if the spike's planted open. Defending smokes on B is also pretty simple. All you need to do is place your star on this choke point to deny vision from B ramp. However, you shouldn't smoke up immediately unless your team is willing to give up ramp space and play passively. For the last map in the current rotation, we're going to make our way back to Split. So when attacking A, smoke off screens and tower so your team can focus on clearing sight. Make sure your screen smoke doesn't bulge, as it can create an opening for the enemy team to creep up to elbow. And as a bonus tech, since Omen's the best controller for this map, you can use the smoke on tower as a TP spot for a nice backstab on heaven. If your team planted the spike open, you can use this one way to make defusing a whole lot more difficult. And an alternative spot would be this on TV, where you can also place a nice little one-way. If you're planning to take B, smoke off alley and heaven like so, and navigate your way around the site for complete site control. For defending B, there's two types of smokes you can work with to prevent entry. First one is this typical choke point smoke on B main, and the second one is this clever box smoke, which creates a small opening on the left for an effective one-way smoke. When attacking mid, it all depends on whether you're planning to push B through vents or A through stairs. And if pushing through vents, smoke stairs to block off peekers from Mail and Heaven. If pushing B Heaven, smoke off vents to safely scale up into stairs. Whichever area you're pushing, it's worth mollying the area you're leaving so you don't get pushed from that area. These types of mid executes also work best if there's a pinch coming from A or B main, so try to incorporate that into your strat as well. For defending mid, you could just place your smoke on this choke point where the cross from the left box and Mail meets. Now for Sunset, let's start with attackers. When attacking on A, you want to smoke first the stairs on the left right here, and then the entrance over towards alley. These two smokes should give your team enough coverage as you're coming into sight. Just be sure to have someone to hold the smokes as you're planting to make sure no enemies swing through them. Otherwise, you could get caught off guard as you're running in. Now on B, it's pretty standard. You'll want to smoke market and spawn. The market smoke is going to bleed out a bit from the doorway, different from what we normally want to do. Now the reason for this is that if you have it flushed with the doorway, enemies can walk out of the smoke and isolate the entrance of sight, which can make it pretty difficult to hold. Some people may consider smoke in the middle of sight, but this smoke can be kind of bad since it makes it difficult for your team to take back sight. In mid, we have a standard top mid smoke. You can also consider smoking market too if you need, but normally this door gets shut anyway. If your team wants to create a bit more pressure in mid, you can also smoke the right side instead, which will make it difficult for them to gather info on top mid. Now on defense, it's pretty standard. You could smoke the entrance of B main. In mid, just a standard mid smoke works well too. And over on A, consider both this one way as well as this smoke in elbow. It can be kind of hard to hold A in general, but these can make great retake smokes.
All right, though, guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and we think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's kind of like a gym membership guaranteeing you that you're gonna get ripped. Your local gym would probably go bust if they offered you that. But not us, because we've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the internet. We add new courses every month with over 1,000 guides curated into over 50 courses. No one can compare. We also have a direct line of communication with subscribers in our Discord so that you can get connected immediately to some of the best players in the game who will respond to every question you ask. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you're serious about improving your game. So that's going to be all for this one today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.